Welcome back. Well, over the last 12 hours or so, most of the focus has been around the Zondo Commission, the findings and the recommendations that it's made. You'll know, of course, some of the findings, that people like David Ngcobo should face criminal charges, the suspended Secretary-General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, Duduzane Zuma as well. And then there's also some findings about President Cyril Ramaphosa saying he could have done more to end state capture, asking questions around why he doesn't. Well, at around lunchtime today, we received a notification that the ANC is now holding a special National Executive Committee meeting. It's going to happen tonight. Our senior political reporter, Ziyanda Ngcobo, joins us. Ziyanda, good afternoon to you. What is this meeting going to be about?
Well, the ANC and those in the NEC are remaining quite tight-lipped, I must say, Stephen, about what is going to be discussed in the meeting. But I think suffice to say that it's rather convenient that this special NEC is being called a day after the release of that Zondo Commission report, and what it says about NEC members who would be implicated in the report. We know that some have already indicated that they'll take the report on review, the likes of Malusi Gigaba, but it needs to be discussed in line with how the step-aside guidelines were recently tightened. Now, this is also going to then become very critical going forward, especially when you look at the balance of forces within the NEC currently and who exactly it will affect. You'll know that there have been calls for even National Chair Gwede Mantashe to also step aside from his ministerial post. And so these are all the things I think going into this meeting could actually become a divisive topic. We know there's also still that issue of the 19 quarantine votes in Ekurhuleni. There's also still the albatross around the president's neck regarding the Phala Phala Farmgate scandal, which we still don't know when the president is going to be presenting himself before the Integrity Commission. So lots to process by the NEC, especially when it comes to against the backdrop of the various conferences as well that the organization is holding.
I mean, there are just so many dynamics here. I mean, even if we don't even look at the Gauteng provincial conference, we'll come to that in a moment, and Ekurhuleni and all the rest. But just the issue of state capture and the interface of Phala Phala, which of course was Arthur Fraser's desire all along. I mean, this is what he wanted. That doesn't mean the president doesn't have serious questions to answer. Clearly he does. But I can just sort of play it out in my mind that somewhere on a very secure Zoom link, where there will be a situation where someone will say we need to act against David Ngcobo. Then someone else will say, well, but then Gwede Mantashe, we need to act against him. Then someone will say, I don't know, let me guess. Tony Yengeni will say that, no, we must act against the president because of Phala Phala. This is where it gets, what's the word we use nowadays? Messy.
Murky, yes, messy. I think this is exactly it. And the timing of the affidavit that was written by Arthur Fraser then becomes even more critical as the NEC now sits. And, I mean, there's still questions as to why he only decided to do it now. But that's a story for another day. This meeting, I think, Stephen, has the potential to be explosive just because of how we know individuals within the NEC, their first instinct will be to want to protect themselves, but also divisive because we know of the individuals within the NEC who've sort of almost been waiting for some sort of scandal against President Cyril Ramaphosa. And as you've already mentioned, he does have some very serious questions to answer for. But this also then has an implication, I think, Stephen, as this report now needs to be deliberated on by Parliament, the ANC caucus there as well. How united are they? How will they also be dealing then with this issue, given the fact that someone like Mosebenzi Zwane, for an example, he's the chairperson of a portfolio committee in Parliament, which means he forms part of the ANC caucus. So how exactly will the ANC caucus and Parliament be processing the report? And in the interim, against rumours that there could also be a cabinet reshuffle aligned with when, the implementation of the Zondo recommendations are done, these are all things that I think each NEC member is also weighing up going into this meeting, but also in other meetings of the ANC going forward.
There's so many different elements to all of this. I mean, if we just go back a little bit, Ziyanda, it would seem to me that one of the problems that they actually have is that the ANC for a very long time has said, let's wait for the final findings of the Zondo Commission report. And one of the useful things about the Zondo Commission report has been that it's given the ANC time, right? We all know what's actually happened with the problems around state capture. We all know what's actually happened around how it is that we've started to see all of these allegations over this, and we've seen, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa promise again and again to act against corruption. So we have these promises, and what's helped them is to say we need to wait for the final burning and the final findings of the Zondo Commission report. Now the report is here, and the time, well, it's run out.
Time's run out, and the patience of South Africans has run out equally so. And I think what's also important to remember is the various cases that are still before the courts to deal with some of what has already come out from the different, phases of the report. The time has run out, and what is it going to do to the ANC? What is the president and his top six going to do when it comes to actually implementing internally within the organization what this report actually says? The president himself has also been found wanting. He was the chairperson of that ESCOM war room, for an example. His complicity will come into question, and we know what it's like now in terms of the level of debate within the organization. It's more like, well, you can't tell me because you've done it too, and not necessarily anyone taking the moral high ground. And that becomes a problem then, because this very moral high ground that the president has been taking is exactly now what's going to be an albatross around his neck because of the Phala farm gate. So I don't see those discussions becoming easy at all. And who then is going to lead those kinds of conversations, given just how much factionalism has been institutionalized in the highest decision-making body of the African National Congress? It's very tricky. We mustn't forget that there's still that elective conference at the end of the year. So whatever happens now will have a domino effect for several elements within the organization.
Hanging over all of this is the 2024 election. And we focus a lot on the provincial, on the national election. I understand why that is. If the ANC falls below 50%, it'll have to go into a coalition. If it falls much further, well, maybe that option won't be available to it. But underneath all of that, the discussion we sometimes forget is what's going to happen in the provinces. So in KwaZulu-Natal, 45% of the votes cast in KZN during the local elections last year went to the ANC. In the Free State, it was 50.06% of the votes. In the Free State. And in Gauteng, it was just over 36% of the vote. There's a Gauteng ANC conference this weekend. In a way, the worst possible scenario for the ANC is a divided conference in Gauteng. What did David Mukura call the Ekurhuleni conference? A war zone.
Yeah.
Lebogang Maile versus Panyaza Lesufi. How's it going to play out?
I think one thing to always remember is that when a conference is this tightly and hotly contested, it means, to me at least, that it has the greatest potential for divisions after the conference going forward if the organization does not really manage the dynamics beforehand. And this is exactly it. You'll recall that this is not the first time that Lebogang Maile and Panyaza Lesufi go toe-to-toe. It happened at the last conference when they were contesting for the position of deputy chair. And Panyaza Lesufi only won, I think, about by 22 votes. And that was also after he consolidated with the likes of Parkstar, who was still, the Joburg regional chairperson. So if there isn't that kind of bargaining where you have someone pulling back and really negotiating what then the slate will look like, it becomes very tricky, and it becomes a zero-sum winner-takes-all type of game. And this is what we've been seeing then at ANC conferences. And then it becomes a challenge then after the conference to really consolidate that power, because then you have this sort of binary between the two. You almost have two ANCs, or even three or four within one organization. And then what does that mean? It means a weakened election machinery. You're talking about 2024. You have sometimes, in some instances, a deliberate attempt to undermine the incumbent leadership. In other instances, you also have, ANC members working with other councillors to actually assist with the downfall of the organization. I think at this point, Stephen, what we've been seeing happening at a national level is that let's unite around President Cyril Ramaphosa, because every time there's a jostle for the position of president, then there's a split of sorts, whether you talk about COPE, whether you talk about, at some stage, the formation of the EFF. So the real challenge then, if you look at, the conference of the the ANC here in Gauteng is going to be, what is it about these candidates that will be able to be appealing not only just to ANC members, but the public at large, to be able then to garner those votes, you know, going into 2024. Already, I'd say the campaigning for 2024 is in full steam ahead when you look at what other opposition parties are doing, you know, across the board, and you have new entrants like Action SA. So really, I think, you know, this conference will be critical then for whether or not then David Makhura is the last Gauteng Premier coming from the ANC.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, so much to talk about, so much more to talk about. Thank you very much indeed. Our senior political reporter, of course, updating you on that special NEC meeting. The moment that we find out what's going on inside it, whether it's an official statement or we just find out what's going on inside it, we'll bring that to you.